Yo, before we get into this awesome episode of Optimize Your Body podcast, I'm offering you a free metabolic assessment. Now, this is a process I normally only use for clients. And what it does, it gives you a metabolic score, which tells you the best path to take to get the fastest, most sustainable results possible for your body, whether your goal be fat loss, build a muscle, or both. And it also shows you this metabolic score, shows you exactly how to optimize your metabolic health. I'm offering one more of these this year. So all you got to do is click the link in the show notes. Enjoy the episode. Ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of Optimize Your Body podcast. Got my man Scott Myslinski here today. How you doing, my man?
Great. How are you, Martin? Thanks for having me.
Hey, pleasure, man. Pleasure to have you back on again. Again, it's been a couple of years, right, since we last chat. That was back in the Carnivore cast days, you know.
Yep. Previous life.
I'm sure a lot of the people in the audience will know you because a lot of people did find me through the Carnivore space and stuff, and through podcasts like yourself, like your old one. I know you've got a new one now, which we'll discuss. But yeah, so a lot of people will already know you. But I'd love, rather than me kind of reading out your bio, I'd love you just to kind of introduce yourself to the audience, my man.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Scott. I'm 32 years old. I live in New York, in the United States. I do the podcasting thing for fun. It's a hobby. I have a full-time career for a technology company. I've been working in that space for over 10 years now. I am a bodybuilder now. That's something I've taken on in the last 4 years or so since COVID. And prior to that, I was a competitive lightweight rower in college and in high school before that. And I followed the carnivore diet strictly for 3 years from 2016 to 2019, right around the time that Sean Baker started it. And I had a podcast called the Carnivore Cast, where I interviewed experts, researchers, like yourself, and N=1 case studies of people who had overcome various conditions and chronic illnesses using the carnivore diet. And now I have a podcast that's a little more focused on bodybuilding as well as other topics that catch my interest.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I'd love firstly just to go back a bit because I want to get deeper into that. I want to talk more about your transition, obviously with the podcasting and also with what you've done, like you said, over the last 4 years with bodybuilding and immersing yourself into that world. But go a bit deeper into, because I know you were obviously a really high level rower, right? Back when you were a teenager. And I'd love to go a bit deeper into your background with fitness and then ultimately what, and then we can kind of fast forward to, when you said 2016. So from there, when you kind of transitioned into carnivore in 2016 and kind of what the reason was for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I grew up a pretty sedentary child. I played around a lot, played various sports, but I was a bit overweight growing up, just eating a lot of junk food, typical American diet. And around middle school, which is like sixth to eighth grade in the US, I hit a really rebellious streak where I was getting in fights at school and wanted to drop out and join a rock band and really didn't have a strong purpose or a lot of discipline or anything I was very committed to. And then a few of my good friends who I just hung out with on the weekends and played video games with were really into rowing. And my high school had a rowing team down on the local pond. It's just a few minute walk down from the high school to the pond every day. And, it was it sounded very relaxing. You just go on the water on a boat and hang out with your friends. So I figured I'd give it a shot. And I quickly found out that there was a lot more to it than that. It was a sport that requires a lot of suffering and discipline and dark hours in the winter on the rowing machine. And I became very addicted to it. And quickly became the captain of my local team. And then a friend of mine On the women's team, she started going into commuting into Boston in the city, over an hour drive every day each way, to row for a club team on the Charles River. And that team had kids from all different schools. It had some of the best rowers in the country. It had the top recruit for heavyweights, for men, and a bunch of other really talented athletes. And, I had started to kind of outgrow my local team. And I was, a lot of the kids who I rode with in high school were more interested in partying and living like normal kids, to no fault of their own. And I wanted to take it much more seriously. And so then I started commuting in, and I found out from people there that you can actually get recruited to college for rowing. You can get into a good school. And I was like, wow, I had no clue. And so I started really applying myself to rowing, started really focusing on my erg score, because the way recruiting in the US works for rowing is there are only two numbers that matter. It's your erg score on the rowing machine, how fast you can complete 2,000 meters. That's kind of the standard. And then your SAT score academically. And you're basically a combination of those two statistics. And so I started getting my score down really low, very fast. And I started applying myself in school and getting better and better grades, and did well on the SATs. And I was fortunate enough to be recruited to an Ivy League school where I rowed for about 3.5 years. I was a lightweight rower, so that means you have to actually cut weight, similar to like wrestling or other weight class sports. But I was, doing it 365 days a year. I was rowing every single day. Some days were two a days, 6 hours of rowing total. And it's an endurance sport, so you can just keep doing more and more and more. And I got really addicted to that, and loved the team environment. I surrounded myself with rowers. My best friends were rowers. My college roommate was a rower. I was in the rowing fraternity. I didn't really associate with anyone else. And so that kind of became my whole life. So I'll pause there. I've been kind of talking for a while, but if you have any questions, otherwise I can keep going.
Oh no, that's great. That sums up what got you into it. And look, rowing, it actually makes me feel sick, my man. When I just look at people, I went to London recently, and we were looking at people just rowing on the Thames. And like you say,
Yeah.
you can actually get the wrong idea and go, "Oh, that's quite relaxing. I might take that up."
Yeah.
Rowing is absolutely savage. Talk about character building, though, bro, from a young age.
Yeah.
That, like, honestly, the pain, like, let's be real here. When it comes, okay, ultra marathons, running, Tour de France, rowing, man, because it involves like so much, like legs, for example. It's like 60 to
Yeah.
70% legs, right? The power that you
Yeah.
have to generate, and to do that for long periods, man, endurance. It's another
Yeah.
animal, bro.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think all endurance sports, when you take them to the highest level, are incredibly grueling. Like swimming, running, cycling, triathlon. But yeah, rowing is definitely very intense. I also think there's a lot of aspects to it that are very unhealthy that aren't talked about. One of the problems, especially in the US, is it's more common in other countries to do sculling, which is when you have two oars and you row like this. And you can either do that in a single rowing by yourself, or with others in a double or a quad. But in the US, the most common is called sweep rowing, where you're rowing to one side. And you don't usually switch sides. You like specialize in one side. So you develop very asymmetrically, and it's also causing a lot of continuous wear and tear in one direction. So lots of rowers have rib injuries and back injuries, spinal injuries. Very, very common for rowers, because essentially the movement, you're on a sliding seat. So it's essentially like a leg press, but you're holding on to a bar. So it's kind of like halfway between a leg press and a deadlift,
Mm,
over and over and over again, and
mm.
going around. going to the side. So imagine doing deadlifts for 3 hours while you're fatigued, all to one side. And that's pretty much what rowing is.
That's an interesting thing, though, right? Because people look up to athletes, and rightly so, right? Because the
Yeah.
commitment and dedication and discipline.
Yeah.
But most of their, but it's not healthy at all. Like when it comes to
Yeah.
longevity, when you go right over to the extreme end of that performance part, there's like a triangle. I'm not sure you may have heard of the triangle of awareness. You've got longevity, aesthetics, and performance, right? In your case, there with Rowan, we'll get into the aesthetics piece because that's where you
Yeah.
have the extreme end with that as well. But with the performance, it's, you got to put your all into the performance piece, and that takes its toll on your body. That doesn't
Yeah.
work for longevity. It's going to have wear and tear. But I was just thinking then, I would think something like cycling long distance would be way
Yeah.
less impact than rowing when you just put it like,
Yeah.
I would think, if you had to
Yeah.
compare the two. But
Yeah. Yeah.
any sport at that level is going to take its toll, right? I think people need to
Yeah.
understand that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's also a lot of unhealthy habits around rowing. Just like any other college sport in the US, binge drinking is ubiquitous. So it's pretty common to, not drink at all during the week. And then on a Saturday night, drink until you're literally blackout drunk. And so I did a lot of that from age, 18 to 22. And it's also the nutrition surrounding it is very poor. There's almost no nutritional advice at all. So it's just eat as much food as you can to support your performance. But also with the weight cutting aspect of lightweight rowing, we had to lose, some guys had to lose 20 pounds a week. And obviously, a lot of that's water, but they were doing very drastic things. And the coaches pretty much turned a blind eye to it. They were like, don't tell me how you do it, just do it, get it done, and try not to kill yourself. And, you would pass down lore from the older senior members of the team on how to do it. And it would be things like, wearing trash bags and sweating in the sauna and, cutting out water a day and a half out and all these things that really don't lead to optimal performance whatsoever.
100%.
So yeah, there's a lot of problems inherent in it. There's the injuries, there's the things with weight, nutrition, drinking. It's really a kind of horrible combination
That's
of
that's that's
things.
interesting though with rowing because I can imagine again. I'm just thinking of the UK where I'm from, and it's big in the UK rowing, and
Yeah,
you're probably aware of that. But when you
yeah,
look at the culture just within the UK within itself, what are you going to do after rowing? It's like a social thing, and then with social
yeah,
stuff comes alcohol. But I want to get into the nutrition piece, right, Scott? I'd love to know. You said there was the nutrition advice from the coaches was
yeah,
absolute garbage. Eat as much as you
yeah,
can. So what is it that made you want to go, you know what? I need to dial this in. And then
yeah.
what then made you transition into carnivore?
Yeah, so when I had to stop rowing from my back injuries, a few doctors told me essentially like you'll be in a wheelchair if you don't stop, because I had such debilitating back injuries all throughout college, just from overuse. I was taking NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, every single day. Not abusive amounts, but still, you're not supposed to take them every single day. And I think that, along with the chronic cardio and the alcohol and stress from the career I took on after college, really contributed to some of the hormonal issues I had later on. But like senior year, when I had to stop, I was looking for a way to stay in shape. I was like, I'm not going to be exercising, 4 to 6 hours a day anymore. What should I do? And actually, around that time was when I was a huge Tim Ferriss fan in college. His first book, 4 Hour Work Week, like came out when I was like a freshman in college, and that really guided like a lot of what I did and how I studied and how I thought about the world. And then when he came out with the 4 Hour Body, I was like, oh, great. So I followed the slow carb diet. That was like kind of the first thing I did after rowing. And then around that time, paleo was more popular. So I started following like Rob Wolf. And I basically went along this evolution of trying different diets. I went from slow carb to paleo to what I would call kind of a, it was actually influenced by an individual named Sam Feltham. who runs the Public Health Collaboration in the UK, which is a nonprofit focused on improving the food guidelines in the UK that govern a lot of things like school lunches and prisons and things like that. But his diet was essentially like very low starchy carbs. It was essentially keto without tracking your protein or fat. Um, and so I followed that and felt great doing that diet for a long time, for a couple of years. And all of this was while I was graduating and started a career in management consulting where I was working up to 90 hours a week, traveling every week, extremely stressful, locked in conference rooms all day. Um, and then I eventually found keto, and I was kind of following keto, but again, not really tracking my fat or my protein, not trying to limit my protein or consume extra fat. And then, and as I evolved through these diets, I felt better and better. And then I was listening to a podcast in 2016 of Amber O'Hearn. She was on the Two Keto Dudes podcast. And she was talking about how a lot of the epidemiological research that vilifies cholesterol and red meat and fat is the same poor research that actually supports vegetables being so healthy. There's basically this effect where if you look at large populations of people, the people who eat more vegetables are also the people who drink less, who wear a seatbelt, who don't smoke, who go to the doctor more often. So they're inherently healthier. It doesn't mean that vegetables necessarily are what's making them healthy. And then she talked about some of the downsides of vegetables with kind of the plant defense chemicals like oxalates and things like that. And I said, hey, this is really interesting. You know, I'm already eating a lot of meat, and why don't I try just dropping the vegetables, just dropping everything but the meat and seeing how I feel? And, you know, I kind of, it sounded great. I thought I could eat as much as I want. I was kind of looking for this magic bullet in terms of metabolism. And at the time, I was really unhappy with how I looked aesthetically too. Um, Even during college, when I was a rower, I was very kind of what you would call skinny fat. I had a high body. I was very lean. You know, I was 149 pounds at 5'10", but and I was a rower, but I had almost no muscle mass, especially in my upper body. And so I was looking for a way to kind of improve my metabolism, gain muscle, lose fat, and be able to eat as much as I wanted. I didn't want to have to like track calories and things like that. And so I thought carnivore could kind of be this magic bullet for that, and also help with things like my sleep and some digestive issues I was having. And so I thought I would give it a shot in 2016. And then around January of 2017 is when Sean Baker started doing his carnivore experiments on Twitter. He wasn't on Instagram at the time. This was way before he went on Joe Rogan, but he was eating like 24 eggs a day and all these crazy things and eating carnivore. And I said, hey, I'll go along with that. And I tried it too, and I felt great. I felt better. I wasn't doing the carnivore diet the way I would recommend someone do it now, knowing what I know. I was eating way too much rendered fat, like liquid fat, like the drippings off of ground beef or mince, whatever you call it. And that was making me upset and sick. I was eating way too much protein, just making myself sweat and have to pee a lot. And yeah, but I still felt great. I was still getting results. I was still gaining muscle and losing body fat. And I improved the diet over time as I learned, as the community evolved. You know, there weren't resources back then in 2016 on like how to do a carnivore diet. It was extremely limited. It was not mainstream at all. And so I started the podcast as well because there were a lot of good podcasts, like the Two Keto Dudes podcast, where they would invite folks like Amber O'Hearn and Sean Baker and stuff on to talk about carnivore, but there wasn't a podcast dedicated to the carnivore diet. And so I thought that was an interesting angle, and I just wanted the chance to talk to smart and interesting people. So that's why I started it at the time. And then that also coincided. 2017 was also the year that I started testosterone replacement therapy. So I had a DEXA scan in like 2015, just to see what my body fat percentage was like. And like I said, I was like 150 pounds, 5'10", and I was 20% body fat. And I always thought of myself as lean and fit, and everyone told me I was, so lean. And the other thing the DEXA scan showed that was really interesting is it shows your bone mineral density. So how thick your bones are, as well as how much muscle you have, how much body fat you have. And my mineral density was three Z scores below the mean. So that means I was in like the 1 percentile of bone density. Um, it was actually below osteoporosis levels. And that is caused by hormonal imbalances. It's caused by low testosterone and especially low estrogen. If you think about a lot of women who go through menopause and then they have osteoporosis, it's often attributed, at least partially, to the lack of estrogen they have, as well as testosterone. So I went to an endocrinologist at a very reputable hospital in Boston, and they tested my total testosterone. And the normal range in the US in terms of units is like 300. It keeps changing, but at the time it was like 300, 350 to like 900. And mine was 100. And it was consistently 100 for like, I kept testing it for a year. And the endocrinologist was just like, yeah, try to eat healthy, control your diet, exercise, all of which I was doing. And then, I eventually found some resources on my own about testosterone replacement therapy. There's a really good individual named Nelson Virgil who has a whole community on testosterone replacement. He's written books on it. If you've seen the movie Dallas Buyers Club with Matthew McConaughey,
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it though. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's about like AIDS patients and how they were getting drugs to help them survive AIDS. He was one of those people. So he had AIDS in like the 70s or 80s, and he found testosterone, and it helped him survive and beat it, and hold on to enough muscle mass. And then he helped a lot of other homosexual men in a similar way, and now he helps all kinds of guys with TRT, and he's very research focused, and he's a great guy. So, anyways, I was learning about that. I found him, and then I found a clinic in the U.S. in Boston that would help with testosterone. I went there. I had a horrible experience. They tried to put me on totally wrong drugs. It was also just really bad patient experience. I had to like go there and make an appointment and pay them just to get them to read me my blood work, and like just horrible. So I ended up finding a really excellent telemedicine clinic, and worked with them. And after a couple of years of deliberating, I finally started TRT in 2017. And I immediately, my mood improved a lot. I had like a very flat mood all the time. People told me I never smiled. That changed. I had more drive. I didn't really have any sexual side effects, which is pretty miraculous for how low my testosterone was. But definitely my body improved. It took time because it's not like I was taking super physiological
Oh, sorry.
levels.
You're on mute. I don't know whether you put yourself on mute, bro.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Hold on. Um, that's weird.
Can you hear me?
Hey,
Hey.
yeah, don't know what happened there, dude. My thing just
Okay.
switched to my mic output, just weird. Anyway, sorry,
Oh,
bro.
no worries. Yeah, so I wasn't on like super physiological levels of testosterone or anything like that. Just trying to get to the normal range, the high end of the normal range. Um, and there was some troubleshooting involved. It's not super easy process. It takes time. But once I dialed it in, it really, really helped me. And between the carnivore diet, helping with my digestion, helping me have more energy, helping me get rid of some of the foods that were really upsetting me and wearing me down, and improving my sleep. And the testosterone, I was able to, uh, I got a DEXA scan 2 years after, and in 2019, I had gained 28 pounds of lean mass and lost 16 pounds of fat. So really improved, and my bone density was then normal, which was awesome. So really, really successful. And I was on the carnivore diet for 3 full years, and then what I started to find is that I actually couldn't eat enough food to sustain my body weight on the carnivore, because I had a lot of trouble handling enough fat calories. So I found consistently I couldn't really eat more than 150 grams of fat a day. And I needed about 4,000 calories to maintain my body weight. So if you can only eat 150 calories of fat, 150 grams, excuse me, I think that's about 1,400 calories. That would mean I need to consume, because there's no carbs in a carnivore diet, I need to consume about 2,600 calories of protein, which is a lot of protein. And, like I talked about before, that has negative side effects too. You have to pee all the time, you sweat all the time. I don't think it's a great idea to eat, 800 or 700 grams of protein a day.
Yeah, I was just doing the
Um,
maths and I'm like, yeah, that's never going to be a good amount generally, is it?
yeah,
It's a bit excessive
yeah.
to say the least.
So I mean, I did that. I ate that much protein for years, but it wasn't great.
Yeah, it's
And
interesting on. Oh, go on, carry on, bro.
no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's interesting on that as well because when you look at the research, right, there's plenty of research to show the benefits of carbohydrates for performance and stuff, right, and recovery,
Yeah,
and sometimes even stress levels as well when it comes
yeah,
to the bit of stress hormones and those kind of things. But when it comes to protein, it's like you hit a certain point, and it's nothing wrong with it though. If your digestion is fine, like for yourself, for example, I did the same as well in my bodybuilding days. I think I was having like 400 or 500 grams of protein for a good few years,
yeah,
and I was okay. I was still good, but it gets to the point then where it's like, okay, if I want to fine tune things and really optimize, then
yeah,
having more carbohydrates and less protein is probably a good thing. But it's always
yeah.
like one of them things as well, and we can touch on this as well. I want to just get into the TRT thing. One more thing on that because I
Yeah.
actually got interviewed by Sean Baker, and I mentioned to him about the
Oh, interesting.
TRT thing. I said to him, I haven't taken it, but
Yeah,
if I ever need it in my 40s or 50s, then I would definitely look into
sure.
it. But his thing is, nah, I don't think you should need to take it. Like he's just like
Mm.
and if you look at him, he's an absolute freak. What, late
Yeah,
50s, an absolute freak of nature. He's a picture of health. I mean, if there's a picture of health, if there was one at that age, he's pretty much the man for the job. And he was saying, look, I don't think you should need to. And I was just telling him what you just said then about the sex drive thing, right? I got a friend, and he basically has a podcast, and he's in his 40s, and his sex drive was fine, right? So we put off this whole TRT thing because, like yourself, his my sex drive's fine. It can't be my test level.
yeah,
He left it for years, and then when he got it checked up, it was really low, like really low. TRT, just like yourself, changed his life. You know what I
yeah.
mean? So that's an interesting topic, you know. But and I've coached some women who went through menopause and stuff, and they've tried HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and some of them have had mainly benefits, but then some of them had awful side effects like hair fall
Mm,
stuff, and they had to back off it, right? So there's a
yeah,
lot of nuance when you start playing with hormones, right? So you've got to make sure you
sure.
do it the right way. And like yourself, sounds like you did a lot
Absolutely.
of research.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of stigma in the fitness industry against TRT, like it's cheating or something. But I don't see, like, if it's true TRT, it's like medicinal. It's literally
100%.
trying to
It's
replace
health. It's health, isn't it? And I want to
normal
be
levels.
clear there with the
Yeah,
audience as well, because
yeah,
I've said, and I said to you, I've got nothing against people who take steroids and stuff like that.
yeah,
That's all good. Like you just do it the right way, right? But when it comes
yeah,
to TRT, just for the audience, like replacing your hormones, it's actually
yeah.
different to just pumping a bunch of anabolic steroids in you to look
Sure.
better. This is health related
Yeah,
with about now, right?
yeah, yeah. If you have a normal, healthy level of testosterone and you go on TRT, it will do absolutely nothing for you. Um, so that's the difference. I think, yeah, absolutely. It's interesting about the sexual side effect because a lot of people think that is like how you know if you need TRT. But if you think about it, this is just something I've thought about. As humans, like the most important thing we need to do is procreate. So like that's probably the last thing that'll go away. Like even when you're really sick, you
That's
can,
a really good point. I've never thought of it like that.
yeah. So I think it more often than not, people that will be like the last thing to go. And a lot of men are diagnosed as depressed or given antidepressants when really it's a low testosterone thing. Low testosterone is really unhealthy, actually, having chronic low testosterone. It's really bad for your kidneys. It's bad for your prostate. It's bad for your heart. It's bad for your bones. It's bad for your metabolism. It's bad for your brain. So there's a lot of benefits of TRT for people who are hypogonadal, clinically hypogonadal, which is what I was. But that's very different than what I do now, which
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
is
And let's get into that now.
yeah,
I'd
yeah,
love to just to give the so 2016 to 2019, you were
yeah,
carnivore, right? And
yeah,
then because I know you said and I had the same thing, right? So last year I did 2 months. That's all. I did 2 months of carnivore. I did 1 month
yeah,
I was eating mainly just meat and eggs, and I was eating some like beef tallow and stuff, some added fats
yeah,
to get the calories in. And then in October I did it, and I did like 2 weeks, right? And I'm like yourself, right? It's stupid in a way, right? Because we do things when we commit to things, right? This is really it's all a net, it's mainly a net positive, but then it's dumb sometimes, right? Because I'll
yeah,
commit to something, and once I've called it out on social media or my podcast, I'm like, I gotta follow
yeah,
through with this now, even though I
yeah,
knew that basically this
yeah,
is the first time this happened to me, right? So I did October. I think the first half of the month it was like more varied, but it was carnivore, like low no carbs, carnivore diet. Then the last 2 weeks, I thought I'm going to try this lion diet thing, right? So I just went
oh,
one meal a day, 1.5 kilos, which is about what 3.5 pounds of Scotch fillet steak, one meal in the evening. That's it, dude. Like I would train at like 7 a.m. right or
yeah,
7:30 a.m. and I wouldn't eat my first meal. I just have one meal at like 4 or 5 p.m. The amount
wow,
of like hunger that I had to push through, right, to do this is
yeah,
ridiculous. And then it
yeah,
never happens. Talking about libido, I never forget the end of October, for the first time, I don't think I can ever remember this happening unless it was stress related. My libido just died, and I'm like,
yeah,
oh shit, you've been going against your signals for the last two.
yeah. Yeah, well, I think there's this common thing in the carnivore community with fasting, and a lot of people mistake the like energy you get from fasting for like clarity and like health and positive benefits. But a lot of those, at least when I fasted as a, lean individual who needs a lot of food, who's high stressed, who had no, reason to, there are a lot of, reasons why fasting may be beneficial for some people, but I was just doing it to try to, I don't know, be better. And it just spikes your cortisol. Your adrenaline goes through the roof when you haven't eaten for long enough. And those cortisol hormones are very high, and it'll make you feel really alive and like you have a lot of energy, but that's not a healthy state to live in. um,
100%.
and
And that's a good point because literally, I'll be honest, I'm actually doing it now, right? So I got a black coffee here. I trained this
mhm,
morning and I did it like the last few weeks. I'm like, I want to make some gains, right? I've upped the volume with
yeah,
training. So I thought I've got to get that third meal in. So the third meal would just literally be a shake, throw an avocado in there and,
yeah,
600 calories or whatever. But then I'm like, it slows down my productivity, right? That's the annoying
mm,
thing. Then I have that. Then I got to go for a walk, just balance my blood sugar out
yeah,
because of the shake, right? And I'll throw some berries.
yeah,
It's like it again, I mentioned before about my binge eating thing that I used to have. It kind of triggers something where it's like, then I'm thinking
mm,
about food for like 10 minutes. Then I go for a
yeah,
walk and it's just not productive for me. So, like, now I
yeah,
could argue, I feel great. I'm full of energy. But going
yeah,
back to your point, especially with females, man, there's like loads of research on this now with fasting. It just doesn't work as well. It's your body's basically in that. You don't fight or flight kind of, but your cortisol levels are elevated.
exactly,
And it's just, you just, no shit, you got energy. You go
yeah,
through the roof.
yeah,
and
yeah,
then black
yeah,
coffee on
exactly.
top of that.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So yeah, end of 2019, I was kind of feeling that fight or flight state a lot of the time, and it was actually really hurting my sleep. My insomnia, which I've struggled with my whole adult life, was the worst it's ever been. And so I consulted with an individual named Seamland. I don't know if you've heard of him, but
I
he
haven't.
was he's like big in the biohacking space, and he was kind of carnivore adjacent and talked a lot about fasting and different things. But anyway, he gave me some advice on how like having a banana for before bed, this small amount of glucose can help refill liver glycogen and help you sleep. And so I tried that for a week or two. And then I basically decided to do a food reintroduction protocol. So like if you do the Whole30 diet, for instance, which is 30 days where you eliminate a bunch of foods,
And
they
by
have
the
a
way, I
protocol.
want to say on that point, out of all diets, if you had to choose one, right? Whole 30,
Yeah.
think about it, right? It's probably one
Yeah,
of
it's
the
a
best.
great diet.
Yeah.
I think it'd help a lot of people. And then basically they have this system where you go 3 days where you try a new food, and you have one serving of it each day for 3 days, and you monitor how do I feel, how's my digestion, how to different biomarkers, or qualitative factors rather. And so I did that very slowly, but I did it with one individual food at a time. So not like fruit. I did it with like banana, and then I did strawberries, and then and I did this with all these foods. And I basically found out what foods worked for me. And then I basically got to, a lot of fruit, white rice, and Greek yogurt and a couple other things along with meat. And
Sounds just
I,
like
I
my
felt,
diet right now, man. It's
yeah, and I
the same
felt
as I
even
eat.
better. I
Yeah.
felt even better than I did on carnivore, and then my sleep improved and had more energy and all these things. And of course, there were some setbacks along the way where, I went too high on the fiber too quickly, and I had to back down and all these things. But over the long term, I was able to reintroduce foods. And then in 2020, lockdowns happened, and I got very into working out and bodybuilding more. And I was already on TRT. And so I basically said, and I was very still pretty unhappy with how I looked. So my body image was pretty bad after I stopped rowing. During rowing, coincidentally, I didn't care how I looked at all. I didn't care if I had abs. I didn't care if I had muscles. I didn't care if I was fat. All I cared about was performance.
Yeah.
And then after rowing, I was pretty unhappy with how I looked. I would look at myself in the mirror and, think very negative things. And TRT certainly helped that. But I still wanted to look better. I had an image in my head of what I wanted to look like, muscles, six pack, kind of like not the crazy superhero physiques we see nowadays, but maybe like, the superhero physiques of 2 generations ago.
Like the Frankie Zane kind of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I thought, I can do this naturally, and it will take me a certain amount of time and a certain amount of, discipline and, really focusing and not traveling and all these things. Or I can, probably take like 5 years, or I can shortcut it to like 2 years and take a little bit more than TRT. And it was a pretty stupid mindset looking back on it, but that's what I said to myself. And so, I started taking a little bit more very gradually under the advisement of coaches, while doing my blood work every 2 to 3 months, like way more than anyone else does. And I started seeing results, and things escalated. And of course, the goalposts changed, and I got more and more into bodybuilding. And then, funny enough, about a year into that, I was really happy with how I looked. I stopped caring about how I looked. I was happy with my physique, didn't have any body image issues. I'd say today I'm very happy with how I look. I don't look at myself in the mirror and think, ooh, gross, fat, or anything like that. I think, oh, this muscle could be a little bigger, blah, blah, blah. But on the whole, I'd say I'm very satisfied with how I look. But then it became about really enjoying the sport and being obsessed with progress. And that thing that I got in rowing, which I haven't been able to find really in my professional life yet, which is you put in work and you get output. And being addicted to that sense of progress. I really love that. And, I think a lot of athletes, when they retire, whether it's from college or professional athletes, that's part they really miss, is this sense of clear goals and progress and moving towards something. And it's a lot harder in the corporate world, where things are a lot fuzzier, and sometimes you work really hard on a project and it just kind of gets canned, or you're collaborating with other people. It's really hard to see that direct line from your efforts to results. I mean, it's a bit different if you're an entrepreneur, of course. But that's what I really love about bodybuilding. And then, I just got more entrenched in it. I made friends in it. I became obsessed with the science and, the every aspect of it, the training, the diet, the drugs, the supplements, and just kept educating myself until I finally decided to compete earlier this year. I did a photo shoot last year. I competed this year. And then I'm going to compete one more time next year, and then I'm done.
Mate, I got to say as well, just for the audience, and I want to, yeah, so you won that show as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. And even if you even if you don't win, right, it's a win just to get on stage, right? But obviously,
Yeah.
we're playing to win. Let's not lie, right? It's winning feels amazing, losing sucked, right?
Yeah.
But hey, like absolutely insane condition you brought to the stage, and
Thank you.
I wanted to touch on that kind of body image thing, right? Because we kind of glossed over it, and
Yeah.
I'd love to know because you're in amazing shape. Um, so people easily from the outside and oh yeah, no shit, he hasn't got any body image issues. He looks amazing, right? But people actually get that wrong because I'm sure you met a lot of people like your peers in the bodybuilding
Yeah.
world. I met loads. In fact, most of the kind of I mentioned this before, most of the body image stuff I saw, and even kind of relationship with food as well. I've seen some of the worst behaviors within that world where from the outside
Yeah.
in, people would look on Instagram, hundreds of thousands of followers and millions of followers, see their physique and go, wow, they've got it all. You know what I mean? My life sucks. But actually, there's a lot more to it, right? And
Yeah.
with yourself, I'd love to know, number one, if you saw kind of any of that in that world. And number two,
Yes.
how you got to that point where because it's not like an overnight thing, right? Where you just look in the mirror and
Yeah.
go, I'm really satisfied with my body.
Yeah. Yeah. I think absolutely there's a ton of it in the fitness community and bodybuilding in general. People are always critiquing themselves. Some of it is objective and joking. Some of it is coming from a place of deep emotions and insecurity. And I see it all the time. And yeah, definitely like the goalposts change as people get leaner and bigger. They always think, I'm small, I'm fat, blah, blah, blah. And they always want to go to the next thing, go to the next thing. And of course, social media makes it worse, comparing yourselves to others, constantly being bombarded with perfect physiques. Um, I think for me, I don't have a great answer. For some reason, I was able to stay more objective about it. I'm obviously not fully objective about it, but a little bit more than the average person. And I think part of it was I had looked a certain way for so long that I had kind of resigned myself to I will never look the way I want to look. I will never look better than this. And then when I was able to, I was like so elated and so surprised that I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, however, whatever happens after this is just a bonus. I'm like, I never thought I would have abs. I never thought like, someone would look at me and think I'm muscular. And so I think just having myself grounded in decades of being a certain way and looking a certain way and working so hard at it too and being stuck there. And a lot of that was attributed to the rowing and a lot of it was attributed to the being hypogonadal and the hormonal issues. And learning that I could overcome that and finding a way around it. It just, I mean, I have other things I worry about and stress about all day long, but my body image isn't one of them anymore. I mean, it's not like I'm a calm and accepting person of every one of my flaws and everything going on in my life. I have plenty of insecurities and things I spend too much time stressing about, but for some reason, my body isn't one of them anymore.
That's it. That's interesting when you say that because obviously I got into shape for the stage a few times and stuff, and you get to a point you're always going to be impressed, right? But when I think about it, it's always because of the work you've put in, right? Because of the discipline, the consistency, the patience, the perseverance, and keep going down the list, what it takes just to actually get up there and actually bring your best, right? You look in the mirror and it's hard not to be proud of what you've
Yeah,
actually achieved. So now
yeah,
I'm actually reflecting on it now. I'm like, it's more of an internal thing, really, isn't it? I think that gradual thing with your body image, There's going to be other stuff which comes into it, childhood stuff and all that, whatever, right? But for the most part, it's like, wow, I put all that work in, and it's very black and white. Now you've got the genetics piece, right, when it comes to competing, which makes the world of difference. Of course, it's kind of like genetics lowers the gun, right? But then all that hard
Yeah.
work, discipline, consistency, and then when you bring your best, you look at yourself and you go, wow, like no one picked up the weights for me, no one ate that food for me. I did it all myself,
Yeah.
and it's really empowering. And that must do something for your self-esteem and body image. Body image.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that then.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's very well said. Yeah, it's a very hard accomplishment. Most people can't do it or don't want to or aren't willing to. And I don't believe in feeling superior than other people just because you do bodybuilding and they don't. I think that's kind of BS, but I do think you should be proud that you're able to do it.
Yeah, definitely, man. And just with food and stuff, right? I want to just give a little bit of value and insight for the audience to kind of summarize this podcast in terms of how you eat now. So in 2019, obviously, you switched over, you started slowly introducing carbohydrates, right?
Yeah.
With where you're at now, because for me, I know I just do better with carbohydrates in my diet pretty much
Yeah.
all the time, to be honest. Like, to be
Yeah.
honest, bro, like this year, I tried keto instead of carnivore. So just like yourself, because I find it hard to get enough food in. My maintenance
Yeah.
calories are like 3,800, right? So basically, I could pretty much do it with keto, but even that, I literally did it for a day last week, bro. And I was already a bit more stressed with everything going on, training
Yeah.
harder, slept like absolute dog shit. And I track it. I haven't got it on now, the Aura Ring and the 8 Sleep. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is not working for me. I'm just doing better with carbs,
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. And obviously, there's so much variance from person to person. But I'd love for
Yeah.
just you to just give a bit more of an insight into the flexibility you now have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mostly view food as fuel, as I kind of always have. I haven't been a huge foodie before, other than when I was a fat kid. But I I just really value good digestion and feeling good and energy. And I think different people will find that with um, different combinations of fat and carbs, different spectrum of those things. But I think, one thing that's pretty ubiquitous is most people do better with less processed food, more single ingredient food. And I think a lot of people have dogma against certain types of even single ingredient foods, like rice. People think, oh, rice is the devil because it's carbohydrates, it'll spike your blood glucose. But, you know, that's something that really works well for me. And, same thing, if you're going to have, fat in your diet, like, does it make a huge difference if it's olive oil or butter? Or, some people demonize butter completely because it's saturated fat. It's horrible for you. It'll raise your cholesterol. But, there are benefits to butter. It has some nutrients, and some people do really, really well with it. And some people don't tolerate certain types of oils and seed oils and things like that. So I'd say just one thing for the audience is to keep an open mind. Find what works well for you. It might change over time depending on, just how you age, how your body changes, your change in activity levels or lifestyle. And it's definitely going to be different than random guru X on the internet. So, either work with fantastic coach like Martin who can help you figure that out, or be willing to experiment and try things to yourself. And I think you can't go wrong focusing on animal protein, fruit, and then from there, you can build up other things that you tolerate well. Some people really don't do well with vegetables. I'm one of them, but I find, there are low sugar fruits like zucchini, and things like kimchi that I can tolerate. And, try different things and see what works best for you. And I'd say the other thing is there's definitely a trend in the fitness industry to try to add stressors. So whether it's cold plunges or sauna or fasting or CrossFit, or zero carb, people are trying to add stressors to their life. And it's good to have some stress, but when you stack all these stressors on top of each other, especially if you already have a stressful life, whether it's kids or your job, it just leads to negative results. It's bad for your health. It's bad for your physique. It's bad for your mental. So think about how many stressors you have and don't just add things because you heard they were good or because someone like Andrew Huberman is doing them. You know, think about what works for you and works within the confines of your life.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you said, man. There's no magic bullet, right? And let's be honest, most people are looking for that, right? They're looking for that, and that's where they might find something like carnivore. And the reality is, I hate to say it, but most people, even if you're eating carnivore and it's working for you, whatever you're doing, it's working for you. We're all for that. It's amazing. But the likelihood is it's not going to be the long-term answer. If you want to get to optimal health and you want to thrive, you know what I mean? And it really depends on what you want as well out of it. But yeah, and I love what you said at the end there with add-in stresses. That's such a good way to look at it. People are always looking. I can't tell you how many times that I see that people think they can just do more and it's better. Most of the time, more is just more. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not better.
Yeah.
In fact, it's actually worse because, like you say, you're adding fuel to the fire. A lot of people are already under more stress than ever, right? And then it's weird because, like back in the day, hunter gatherer, tiger chases you, hide in the cave or get eaten. It was more black and white. You know what I'm saying? You would imagine the level of stress hormones. Now it's like that constant, you've got the stimulus from your phone. You've constantly got, emails coming at you from all angles all day long. You know what I mean? It's way more we're exposed to now continuously. And I think people overlook that. And not to mention, as you say, kids, and you got, financial stress, or you got stuff going on and you put like financially with work, or you might just have some big project you're doing and you're losing sleep. There's a lot going on there, and I feel like most people listening to this, I know a lot of people listen to the podcast, they're already kind of aware, self-aware, and a lot of people are kind of type A types, or at least all or nothing types, right? I'm sure they're like nodding their head now, and it's like, no, you need to add in that smart piece to what you're doing, and really, there's just no, like you summed it up, there's no magic bullet, especially when it comes to nutrition, right, man? And you learned that yourself, right? And you had some success. But then you had to fine tune, and then you fine tune to the point where you barely got on stage of one, and you're likely going to. So just to clarify, next year as well is the last show. Is that the plan?
Yeah.
How many times have I heard that? It's going to be my last show. I've heard that many a time.
No, I promised my wife. I have.
Yes, I know that one.
And everything. No, I want to focus a lot more on feeling good. At 230 pounds, I can't do things like hike up a mountain and things like that. And I want to do that. I want to focus on being functional, whatever that means, being able to enjoy life more, being able to have a lot of endurance and vitality and, feel more like you do every day, Martin.
I do my best, man. I do my best. But yeah, Scott, that was awesome, man. Loads of value in the episode once again. Where can the audience find you, man?
Yeah, if you just search Scott Mize Show on Instagram, YouTube, anything, you'll find me, and feel free to reach out if you ever want to talk or have questions. I'm always open to that.
Awesome. Yeah, Scott Mize is MYS. I'll put it in the show notes anyway. And also for the audience, there's still, obviously, you've still got your old episodes up because obviously you used to have the Carnivore cast. If anyone wants to tune into any of the experts he's had on within that space, it's all there on that channel, right? But the new stuff is completely different. And I love that you switch gears. Like I said last time, I love that you switch gears and you're doing what you're passionate about. Because a lot of people get caught up on numbers and everything else, and this is going to get more likes. But you're like, nah, this is a new chapter of my life, and I want to have different conversations. I love that, bro. So hats off to you, man.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Catch up soon.